Hello, my name is Chrissie Hodges. I'm an advocate for OCD, in particular, the community name Pure OCD, which is intrusive thoughts with mental rituals. I'm a certified peer support specialist working with people worldwide to provide support. I can provide referrals. I do 8-week closed groups, and I have an online community for support um, as people are working toward recovery or are in recovery for OCD and just interested in meeting other people and not walking this journey alone. I did a video earlier for NOCD about my symptoms, and I wanted to follow up with what I like to complete my recovery with is the emotional recovery from OCD. So in my previous video, I talked a lot about my symptoms the onset at 8 and how I had several different themes, overarching being religious scrupulosity, and I survived a suicide attempt and a hospitalization. And then I was able to get effective treatment a year after all of that. But I didn't talk a lot about the emotional journey of that. And I want to do so in this video because I think it's so important. Not even just for the grief, but for the idea that there are so many areas that we can be traumatized when it comes to OCD, and we just don't know that, and we don't know that we can continue to get help and we continue to grow, get to know ourselves as we are living alongside OCD as part of our life. There's a lot of grief for me around my childhood and adolescence when I lived with these themes, when I didn't really know who I was, when I felt like my life was a facade and I was living this double life. There's a lot of grief, but mostly there was a lot of anger. And I expressed that, I believe, in the last video, is that when I was first diagnosed, when I was hospitalized for OCD, sure, my first thought was, okay, this isn't my fault. And wow, this is a diagnosis. But my second feeling was anger. Anger of, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that that's what this is. And I have lost all of my childhood and my teenage years. I don't even know who I am anymore. I was so angry, but I didn't know how to be angry. This has more to do with my childhood than anything, but anger was not an emotion I was allowed to express and or was validated to express. And so I buried that anger and just kept living. And after treatment, after the hospitalization, went right back to school like nothing was wrong, still living a double life. Because even though I was diagnosed, I was now hiding this big secret from everybody about living with a mental illness, and the fact that over Christmas break I had been hospitalized and had, thank goodness, survived a suicide attempt. And so it was just awful. And then once I got treatment, it was so great to be able to have some tools, but it still didn't solve the emotional turmoil that I experienced and continued to experience. And here's why. All I knew back then, this was in 1998, all I knew was that I had this disorder and that I needed to get treatment and it needed to be better and I needed to get over it and move on. That's what I knew. And I knew that just from my upbringing, but I also knew that because I felt like I didn't want to be a burden. I felt like I didn't have the right to grieve or to look at my situation. And I just did a podcast with Stu on the OCD stories, and we were talking about how I also just, it had been so intense. I just wanted to be done with it. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to recognize or even let in how bad the experience had been for OCD. So I just thought, you know what? I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm all of these things I don't know how to feel, and I don't feel like I'm allowed to feel. So I'm just going to bolt. And I moved to Colorado, which is where I live now, which, by the way, was a good move because I love Colorado. It is my home, but I bolted. I got out of there and I thought, I'm going to find myself and I'm going to find a new life. And that next, I often say this, that next 12 years of living in silence again about what I had been through, in living in secret, feeling like I'm carrying the secret with me that I can't tell anybody. I can't tell people what my themes were. I can't tell people I had a suicide attempt. I can't tell people I'm mentally ill through my 20s, which of course is the most impressionable years, it feels like, where you're trying to separate yourself from who you were before, and you feel like everybody is ahead of you and everybody has it all together, and I'm this idiot that has nothing together, and I'm so behind and I'm so emotionally dysregulated, and I don't know which was worse, the 12 years after treatment or the 12 years before when I didn't even know it was OCD, because it was all so horrible. Now, I'm not telling you this because I think that your 12 years are going to be horrible. This was in a very different time. We did not have, we did not have access to the amount of information that we have now. We're talking like 1998 to 2010. There was just not the information out there. There was, I mean, you could have Googled Pure O at that point, and Phillips and stuff would have shown up, but you didn't have a lot of stuff. You didn't have people's stories. You didn't know that anybody else was out there that had it. And so it was completely isolating again. But not just that. I just needed to know that it was okay to grieve. I needed to know that it was okay to recognize, wow, I went through something horrible and tough, but life-changing too. And not all bad ways. OCD changes our worldview. OCD can help us see the strong parts of us, which is resilience, strength, all of these things, right? So I went through all of this until a relapse at age 33, 32, 33. I relapsed really bad. But in the meantime, by the way, I had OCD symptoms. I just didn't recognize them because they weren't sexual orientation or they weren't sexual intrusive thoughts where I was getting the groinal. So I didn't recognize it as OCD. And so when I got harm OCD and relationship OCD, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, it took me like a month and a half to be able to figure out it was actually OCD. And it took someone actually telling me, you've asked me the same question 10 times in a row, and I've told you the same answer, and you're not believing me. And it was like this light bulb went on, and I went, oh no, I think I'm doing compulsions. And I was so sad. I was so sad to to recognize it's not going away. I thought getting treatment would mean it would never come back. And here it is. The grief was real. The grief of, oh my gosh, this is part of my life moving forward. And then I got to work. And then I thought, what do I need to do? How do I need to adapt what I have learned in my tools to move through this and to get better? Because if I have gotten better once, I will get better again. And so I just went to work. I did grieve for a couple days. I did. But then I got to work. I I reconnected with Phillips, and I messaged him. I put together a plan on my own. I actually started writing my story down because I was having trouble I was worrying it wasn't OCD. I was having trouble believing it was OCD. So I thought if I write the story of my life, it will reinforce that this is OCD. And that actually became my memoir later, which is super cool that that happened during a relapse. But I just got to work. I was grieving and I was sad and I was angry. I was angry about all the time lost. I was angry that I have to deal with this. But I just thought to myself, but I have to get better and I have to do this. And I did. And it took me a hot minute to be able to get my shit together and say, we got to get through this again. And we also have to make a plan moving forward. And that's what I did. And it took me a while to get back on track, but then I allowed myself to grieve. Then I allowed myself to be angry. Then I allowed myself to say, this is my life. That at times OCD has hijacked. At times I have felt like it has sabotaged things for me. But how do I take control back? Because that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I did. And for me, and this is only just me, I can't tell you what to do. I thought I have to find people. I have to find y'all. I have to find people who get this because I can't do this alone anymore. I'm so tired of hating myself. I'm so tired of living this double life, of people not knowing who I am and me not knowing who I am and me not loving who I am. So not allowing others to love me either. And that was 13 years ago. So 2011, 2012. I thought, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm just going to get out there and start doing stuff because I knew you were out there. I knew you were, and I knew I needed to find you. And that's what I did. I needed community to help with my emotional recovery. I needed people that could walk with me and say, you're not alone. And then I learned as a peer support specialist how to provide that for other people. And I have been walking with this community ever since. And it has been one of the biggest sources of healing that I have had in my entire journey. And that's why I call it my emotional recovery. I had to go through the emotions and I had to recognize that it is okay to go through the emotions. I am allowed to. It's imperative. But then I had to find you. I had to find other people that could help say to me, you're worth it. You deserve it. And in turn, I can say to you, you're worth it. You deserve, no matter what stage you are in, whether it's symptom recovery, whether it's emotional, whether you're dealing with trauma, you deserve recovery. Never forget that. This is not your fault. It was not my fault. And we need each other to remind each other of that. And I am still working every day on my emotional recovery, but that's why I've created the community around me. And I invite you to become part of that. And part of any community like NOCD, thank goodness you're here. You have all these wonderful people around you to walk alongside you because we all need that to normalize, validate, and to remind you that you deserve this. You deserve to get better. So I hope this is helpful. And I'll do a couple more videos for you, but I really wanted to share this. This is an important part of my own recovery. And I hope in any way it resonates where you're at, or even later on in your recovery. I hope it resonates to help you know you're not alone.